Um dos compositores mais importantes da cena contemporânea, Steve Reich, costuma ser lembrado como um dos pioneiros do minimalismo, música caracterizada por repetições, minúsculas variações e um ritmo quase hipnótico. Porém, ao longo dos anos, o compositor que nasceu em Nova York, isso em 1932, adotou uma ampla variedade de estilos musicais e de interesses também, criando uma síntese pessoal que é o que caracteriza a sua produção. No Clássicos documentário de hoje, nós vamos acompanhar Steve Reich, que conta a trajetória do compositor a partir do seu próprio depoimento. Essa é uma produção de 2009 e mostra o artista extremamente jovial e ativo aos 72 anos de idade, logo após ganhar o prêmio Pulitzer de música pelo seu sexteto duplo.
Hello? Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the middle of something. I keep getting this phone call over and over and over again. Who is this?
Congratulations, it's Tom Cole with NPR. Did you know you won the Pulitzer Prize?
Oh, really?
You won the Pulitzer Prize for music for Double Sextet.
Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. I was wondering, I said to the French filmmakers, I said, either this is very bad news or very good news. I'm glad it's the latter. Thank you for calling.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Wow. What a surprise. I won the Pulitzer Prize today. At the age of 72. Oh, what do you know? Wonders never cease. When I was very young, it was, just reaching up to the piano keyboard. I think my youngest, when I was too short to reach it, and just playing fifths. I realized later they were fifths, like C and G over and over, and singing what I call cowboy songs. I began taking piano lessons, I think, around 7 years old, something around like that. Very boring, ordinary piano lessons, simplified versions of Haydn and Bach, but not really Bach and not really Haydn and not really anything. And I did it because I was asked to do it, but it wasn't until I was 14, rather late, that the fire was lit. At the age of 14, a couple of friends had recordings who said to me, hey, take a listen. And one of them was the Rite of Spring. One of them was the fifth Brandenburg Concerto of Johann Sebastian Bach. And the third was Bebop, played by Charlie Parker and Miles Davis and the drummer Kenny Clark. And these music were like, it's like a revelation. And it's as if someone said to you, okay, you're 14 years old and you've never seen this room in our house. And you open the door, and you walk in, and you love it, and you close the door, and I've been living in that room the rest of my life. That's my room. college, I went early when I was 16 years old in 1953 at Cornell University, and I finished with a degree in philosophy in 1957. And I was actually accepted at Harvard as a graduate student in philosophy, and I said, I can't do this. I love music and I want to compose it. Through 61, and then I was reading Jack Kerouac, and it was in the road, you know, all right, Russell. So I went out to San Francisco, and so did Luciano Berio. Friendly human being who wasn't doctrinaire the way, let's say, Stockhausen or Boulez might have been, or Rick Cage might have been. Well, you went to Africa and then you wrote drumming, as if that's not the way it works. I was a drummer, as I said, when I was 14. But what happened in Africa was, it's as if someone pats you on the back and says, it's okay. It's okay to make music with primitive percussion instruments. You don't have to be like Stockhausen music or Cage, using oscillators and ring modulators and tape machines and so on. You can use percussion. Percussion, particularly in Cage's case, led him into electronics, and it can lead you out. Man. But this technique of 12-tone music was really not for me. And the way I dealt with it was, okay, I make up a row, and then I will not transpose it to another, transpose the key, there is no key, move it to another pitch. I will not play it backwards, retrograde. I will not invert it, go down and you go up. I will just repeat it over and over again. And Berio saw this, and he made what I mentioned a lot. He made a very good remark. He said, if you wanted to write tonal music, why don't you write tonal music? I said, that's what I'm trying to do. But if you wrote really tonal music in 1962, 63, people would laugh at you. They would consider you a fool. People didn't want to be left behind, to be an old fogey, we say, irrelevance. So they felt they had to do it. And I felt I had to do it too, but I knew this is not me. I didn't become a composer because I wanted to sound like Boulez or Stockhausen or Berg or Schoenberg or Weber. But because I loved Bach, because I loved Stravinsky, because I loved jazz. And all of those musics were considered, I mean, early, Petrushka or The Rite of Spring, I mean, that was That wasn't part of the menu. It's not on the menu. Sorry. We're out of that for the moment. While I was at Juilliard in the early 1960s, or 62, 63, I began to hear John Coltrane when he started playing my favorite things and what was called modal jazz, which is really playing a lot of notes on very few harmonies, maybe two, maybe one. My favorite John Coltrane recording was called Africa Brass. And basically it's a half an hour on an old LP of just E. The E from the double bass. Now you know, jazz musicians say, "Hey man, what's the changes? What are the chords? The change is E." No, what change is E? E for half an hour. Well, you'd say, well, that's impossible. That's got to be boring. It wasn't. So I must say that, along with Vincent Persichetti at Hills College and William Austin at Cornell and Hall Overton and Luciano Berio, I must add John Coltrane to my list of teachers. At the time I was a student, and not just me, but everybody in my generation who wrote eventually what was called minimal music, I don't think it would have happened. Coltrane was a pivotal part of that.
We're not part of their experience, you know.
Yeah, it'll be a surprise. I'm surprised. So let's just try the third movement.
You want to make sure you're really even on both sides. You don't want to lose, otherwise you lose the overall feeling of rocking back and forth.
This is cool. I love this piece.
I know, this is fun.
Yeah.
I felt loud.
Do that. This is for black people.
Yeah.
Hey, what do you know? Off duty.
If you go that way, right.
I've heard a little bit live before, but never the whole piece. I've heard the guitarist too separately. And Mark Stewart is guitarist with Paul Simon, and the other guitar player, Bryce Desner, is the lead guitar player with the rock group called The National. But he also went through Yale, so he reads, and he's just musician can do anything. They're getting to be a whole new generation of players that just play rock and roll, play classical, new music, whatever you want. It's very nice. Very, very nice. Abierto. It was 1964, and a friend said to me, "You ought to go down to Union Square on Sundays. There's this black Pentecostal preacher who calls himself Brother Walter, who's got the most amazing voice." I went down to Union Square with a portable tape recorder, and he was preaching about the flood of Noah in the Bible.
And again, the wall of Noah, he said, after a while, it's going to rain after a while, for 40 days and for 40 nights. And the people that believe it, and they begin to laugh at it, and they begin to mock it, and they begin to say, it ain't going to rain.
It's going to rain. And just as he said that, a pigeon took off. This is a park, right? There's little pigeons. So you have, if you make a tape loop, you hear, you have a pigeon drummer. It's going to rain. it's going to rain. And then very quietly, low traffic. So this was a fantastic loop. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make 2 copies of this loop. So I put them on these 2 machines, and I pushed the 2 start buttons without even looking. And I put on my headphones, and they, miraculously, I mean, the odds are very high against it, the 2 were lined up in unison. But not exactly. The sound move from this side of my head to this side of my head. Now, what does that mean? That means that actually the loop on the coming in the left earphone was a little bit shorter and was moving slowly faster than the other one, which you perceive as a movement in space. Moving over from the right side of your head to the left side, and like down my shoulder, across the floor, until it begins to reverberate and shake, and then make a cannon or rap, and then finally, 7, 8, 9 minutes later, it's going to rain. But I thought to myself, well, that's nice. But what's really amazing is this journey, this process from unison slowly through all these irrational relationships to sort of stations on a train where it is rational, and then irrational again, and then finally to this destination that I had in mind. And then it keeps on going until slowly, it's like a retrograde, it comes back into unison in the center of your head. And I thought, wow, this you can look at it in many ways. Some people would say, well, lucky accident. Other people would say, well, God gave you a gift. You could choose any way you want to explain it, but that's what happened. After It's Gonna Rain, I began to feel enough with tape. I don't want to spend the rest of my life with tape. But this process, people can't do it. Look at buses, windshield wipers on a bus, they can go out of phase. Bells at a railroad crossing, they can go out of phase. The people? Well, I went through about several months of just feeling, it's great, but it's impossible. And I thought, I've got to write instrumental music, and I don't want to leave this. And finally I said, I'm the second tape recorder. And I made a recording of the pattern that became piano phase, and I put it on a tape recorder, and I sat down at the piano, I said, okay, here we go. And I started in unison with the tape. I could close my eyes because I know what I have to do. I'm not improvising, but I don't have to read it. I know the pattern. I know that I have to get just as slowly ahead of the tape as I can till I'm 1/16th note ahead. And then so on until I'm back in unison, and then the pattern changes. And I found, wow, I can do it. And doing it feels very good. It's like meditating because you're just totally wrapped up in the sound of the music without being distracted by looking at the notes. And then after a few months of working on the details of this piece, I wanted to play with another musician to see, forget about the tape entirely. And it worked. Look, Ma, no tape. pieces are really just a variation of canons. Only instead of a melody, you have a short pattern. And instead of a certain rhythmic distance, you have a flexible distance where it's changing. So the whole phasing idea is just a kind of footnote to the history of canon in Western music.
like you can enjoy the piece. I mean, you're the reigning expert in this entire ensemble. You heard it. This woman knows more about this piece than I do, so she said it's right, it's right. So, only one problem, because nothing's ever perfect. In section 9, particularly for the percussion and for Roland, for the cues, it's a little unclear, I think, to people what the order is that you're cueing. The first, after the voices and the strings build up the melody initially, then Roland has to turn to the percussion. Pianos don't change. Okay, then the next note goes to Jürgen, is it? No, who's playing top piano over here?
Niels.
Niels, okay. So you're going to Niels, and Niels, you go from the pattern to the pulse. Reiner?
When I started to use the human voice, as you noticed in drumming in 1971, right after the tape pieces, I really wanted the voice to become part. I did it. I started to hear women singing. Now, I wasn't on any psychedelic substance. I just heard the women singing. And I thought, so this is the acoustic result of two or more marimbas playing these repeating patterns over and over again. It creates the same, because it's about the same pitch level as a woman's voice, and the overtones are just right for that. So I thought, well, okay, what if you really got some women to come and sing some of these patterns that are really there? All our lives, we live with speech melody. Someone says to you, no. That's one word. Someone else says to you, no. That's another word. What's different? The music and the theater of what they say. And that's crucial for your life, for what people are telling you. That's really a big part of the information. And some languages, as we know in Africa, and I suspect in China, are melodic languages. And if you sing it incorrectly, then you say it incorrectly. So this connection is just part of human life. And I think that's why these pieces work. But these are very different ways of working. Taking a recorded voice and simply presenting it in its musical form, the early tape pieces. Taking a singing voice, but having them only act like an instrument. Saying, okay, let's just sing, the way people have sung words to music for thousands of years. That's in Italian and desert music and Daniel variations. Or taking a recording, but saying, let's work the recording into a real musical instrument, like in different trains, where you really have the two, the documentary reality and the musical reality going on at the same time. So these are different ways of working with text, for sure. by 1981, I felt, what about just writing music with words the way everybody else has done? Can't I do that too? And so in 1981, when I wrote Tehillim, I was also, had gone back into Judaism. I wanted to bring in a Judaic text into the music. And what better text than the Psalms? The Psalms, we know, were written by King David to his son. We don't know how they go. We've lost that tradition. The Yemenite Jews in Yemen are the only Jews on earth who have a living tradition of that. But the rest of us who've went to Europe or other countries in the Middle East lost that tradition, which was good for me as a composer, because I didn't have a little super ego sitting on my shoulder saying, it goes this way. It was terra incognita, and I could compose. I picked out fragments from 4 different Psalms in the original Hebrew, and I started saying them over. I mean, I guess as composers have done for thousands of years. I'd say that Hashemayim Asaparim Kavod Kel, the heavens declare the glory of God, and then finally Hashemayim Asaparim Kavod Kel. And at the same time as the words went through my mind, these numbers went through my mind: 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 1 2 3 1 2. And I thought to myself, what's that? Tehillim actually turns out to be a more traditional Western piece of music. It was 1 step forward, 2 steps back. But for me, something new. And nothing that anybody else had really heard. But the last movement is Hallelujah in D major. Now that's what you have in the Messiah of George Friedrich Handel, is the Messiah in D major. So it conjures up historical precedents, but it really doesn't sound like the Messiah at all, or anything like that. So it's a mixture of old and new. But for me, definitely a step into traditional Western musical practice.
No Clássicos de hoje você está conferindo um documentário sobre Steve Reich, um compositor que escreve uma música muito particular e, por que não dizer, sedutora. Depois de um rápido intervalo, nós voltamos com o final dessa história.
Rumores, boatos, lendas, nada disso. O papo aqui é sobre detonar mitos.
Vocês acham que vai acontecer?
Eu acho que a gente vai fazer um belo estrago.
É isso aí, detonar. Uma das séries mais cultuadas da televisão agora aqui na Cultura.
Isso! Nós estamos prontos.
Adam Savage e Jamie Hyneman, com sua destemida equipe,
Eu acho que não vai dar certo.
vão desvendar as maiores dúvidas da história.
Só há um jeito de se lidar com elas, usando explosivos.
Com a ajuda da ciência
Vai explodir!
e uma pitada de bom humor.
A melhor parte de se trabalhar com o Jamie é que ele não precisa de uma máscara. Ele não usa máscara porque o bigode fornece toda a filtragem de partículas necessária.
Você não pode perder. A partir do dia 19, de segunda a sexta, às 7h30 da noite, estreia Caçadores de Mitos.
Mal posso esperar.
Dá pra imaginar o resto.
Programação infantil de qualidade.
Frente comigo.
Jornalismo com seriedade e opinião.
Tem que pôr a boca no trombone.
Atrações que valorizam a cultura de nosso país e exaltam a pluralidade de todos os povos. Música clássica, documentários, filmes aclamados e entretenimento para toda a família. Fundação Padre Anchieta, Centro Paulista de Rádio e TV Educativas.
Somente a minha família que era normal. Porque o mundo, todo mundo eram deficientes.
Terça, 11 da noite.
Preocupado
pai de seus corações.
Ele morria de dó que ninguém sabia falar com as mãos, só minha família que sabia.
Ela não escuta nada, mas entende tudo. Sueli Ramalho.
Qual foi o primeiro som que você identificou?
O peido. O peido foi fantástico para mim.
Provocações.
Silêncio.
Como fazer uma música que englobe as diferentes manifestações sonoras a que nós estamos expostos na atualidade, sejam elas ruídos da metrópole? Aliás, é fácil falar isso daqui, né? No centro de São Paulo, no Centro Cultural Banco do Brasil, com ruídos da metrópole, ou a música de todos os tempos e de todos os lugares, hoje, via internet, tão facilmente acessíveis. O compositor norte-americano Steve Reich encontrou um caminho pessoal e original para sua criação musical. Nas suas obras, podemos ouvir ecos de Johann Sebastian Bach, Stravinsky, jazz, música popular de regiões como a África e a Indonésia. E isso sem falar nos sons e ruídos, como já disse, que permeiam a nossa vida urbana.
Don't ask me how, God knows, but suddenly these trips on a train that I had taken as a child between my divorced father and mother, my father in New York City and my mother in Los Angeles, one of the lawyer father in New York and the singer and lyricist singer in Los Angeles, came into my head. I began thinking also about the sounds that American trains make and all the different pieces of music that Coal Train, Night Train, Soul Train, Chattanooga, Shoeshine Boy. I mean, we have a whole tradition of train music in jazz and popular music. It was a time of my life, you know, it was a very emotional thing. I mean, it was an adventure to go for 4 days and live on a train. It's also sad because I was just leaving my father or just leaving my mother, and I knew that they weren't going to be together. Then I thought to myself, well, when did I do that? What years was that? 37, 38, 39, 40. What was going on in the world? Well, I was taking that. Well, what was going on in the world was Mr. Hitler was trying to take over the world, and he was starting by grabbing every Jew he could get his hands on and sending them off first to around Munich and Dachau, but finally off to Poland, where nobody would see what went on. And I began to think, well, you know, if I was born in New York and I was traveling to Los Angeles, but I've seen pictures, a very famous picture in the Warsaw Ghetto, of a little boy. He's about 6 or 7 years old. He has a cap on, not this kind of cap, but a peddler's cap, short pants. He looks just like me at that age. And I thought, well, you know, if I was born in Paris, if I was born in Budapest, if I was born in Rotterdam, we wouldn't be sitting here having this conversation. So those were the different things.